I'm speaking to you tonight from Winnipeg on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I invite you to make your own land acknowledgements in the chat. Tonight's webinar series originated with a symposium on childcare policy that was held in Ottawa in June, featuring most of the same speakers. And that conference was sponsored by a collaborative academic research project with lots of community partners called Reimagining Care Work Policies. And we'll put a link to our project site in the chat for you to see. Many events have brought us here tonight, perhaps most importantly, Canada's 2021 budget and the very far-reaching federal ambitions to build a Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare at long last. So how would this federal government lead such change? Well, by doing what advocates and feminists have been asking federal governments to do for more than half a century, which is to take leadership and to use the federal spending power to convince provincial, territorial, and other governments to meet specific early learning and childcare objectives. And just to recall some of the key details of the commitments that have been made. $30 billion for early learning and childcare over 5 years, beginning 2 years ago, over and above 2017 commitments. Getting to a spending of a minimum of $9.2 billion a year after 2025-26. $2.5 billion of the $30 billion being earmarked to support the Indigenous early learning and childcare framework developed by the 3 national Indigenous government organizations representing Métis, First Nations, and Inuit peoples. There's a new federal early learning and childcare secretariat, a new national advisory council of early learning and childcare. And tonight is particularly auspicious. We're on the cusp of seeing federal early learning and childcare legislation being tabled almost certainly tomorrow in Parliament. So while money and these developments provide us with an important opportunity to build childcare, it's just the foundation. We also need to be carefully understanding what still has to be achieved, what kind of policy is required to build the Canada-wide system of early learning childcare and we want. And so tonight's topic is particularly important. We began the webinar series with a session last month on the ECE workforce in advance of the National Day of Action, which centered the workforce last month. But tonight we're turning to national Indigenous leaders to bring a distinction-based lens to thinking about what is next for early learning and childcare system building that works in decolonizing and good ways. So at this point, I turn the session over to the very able leadership of Dr. Margot Greenwood of the University of Northern British Columbia, among many other roles and responsibilities. Most recently, Margot has been named an Officer of the Order of Canada and has just been appointed the newest Senator for British Columbia. It will mean, in fact, that she will sit in the Senate when the legislation that we expect comes before us. Margot will introduce the panel, moderate our time, and she will manage the Q&A that will follow. I'll be working behind the scenes to keep an eye on the chat so that I can raise the questions to Margot on your behalf. With that, Margot.
Hi, Susan. Thank you. Tuesday and good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us this evening. We have some amazing speakers, and I can really see that we're going to have an incredible conversation following some opening comments by our speakers. Unfortunately, one of our speakers was unable to be here this evening, Karen Isaac from the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society. But we will do our best to have a very good conversation. So I'm going to introduce our 2 speakers this evening, and they will speak in the order in which I introduce them. So I'll introduce them first, both of them first, and then I'll turn to Amy, and she will begin her comments. Then I'll turn to Charlene, and following both of their presentations, that's when all of us will be able to start to make our comments and questions that we may have about the presentations. So let's begin. Oh, my mistake here. I am coming to you and speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Lately Tene people, unceded territories. And I'm grateful every day to be able to work, live, and play on their lands. So hi to you. So let me begin with by introducing Amy Graham. Amy Graham is a registered early childhood educator who has worked in the field for over 16 years, the majority of which has been within the Inuit context. All three of her children have attended Inuit early learning and childcare, and she now leads the Inuit early learning and care and the Inuit Child First Initiative files for the Inuit Taparit Kanatami. So thank you, Amy, for being here with us. Our second speaker this evening is Charlene Waddell. Charlene is the Senior Director of Education and Early Learning with the Métis Nation of British Columbia. Charlene's work supports MNBC's mandate and vision of early learning and childcare, in which Métis children and families throughout British Columbia are provided with culturally relevant, self-empowering early learning and childcare programs and supports that focus on children and their families. She does this by promoting the healthy growth and development of children and families through experiences grounded in Métis culture and community ways, and ensuring that the rights, interests, and circumstances of the Métis Nation are acknowledged, affirmed, and implemented. So, as you can see, we have two very exciting speakers. I now turn the microphone and the floor over to you, Amy.
Kuyanimi Margot, thank you so much. I really enjoyed Charlene's introduction. That was really your bio was very, very good, Charlene. Very thoughtful. Thank you, Margot, and I feel very honored to be here this evening. And I'd like to acknowledge that I am currently working and living in the traditional lands of and the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people here in Ottawa. So I would like to just start by saying a little intro in Inuktitut, and then I will follow that in English, and then I will begin my PowerPoint presentation. So, Unukut ilunasi emigram nuyunga, Inuit Tapari Kanatamikuni Ikanayaktunga, Senior Policy Advisor Yunga. So that's just a little bit to get us started and to be reminded that the traditional language of Inuit and the majority of Inuit speak Inuktitut, and it is our place to always support and encourage Inuktitut speaking and revitalization and advocate for services in Inuktitut. So, Kuyanimi again, and I will begin my PowerPoint presentation. And I did say that I would confidently share my screen, and I will. I also want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining tonight. If you are an early childhood educator, if you are working on the floor all day, we completely understand that you are probably exhausted by this time of the night, but we really value having you here today, and we appreciate the time that you have given us. So thank you. So I know we did discuss that the topic of tonight would be Indigenous early learning and moving forward. But I think it's really important for us to just talk about the landscape of Inuit early learning and childcare and talk about where we have come from within this context, because a lot of people are not really aware of what has been happening within the Inuit Nununga and Inuit early learning and childcare landscape. So I'd like to just start there. So the first item that I wanted to touch on was the Inuit homeland. You may have heard this concept more recently. It is something that ITK, Inuit Tapari Kanatami, has been advocating for, the reintroduction of the wording of Inuit Nununga, Inuit homeland. And this is the this is what ITK represents. These are the homelands of the Inuit, which is what our organization is advocating for. So within the Inuit Nunanga, there are 4 Inuit land claim regions. So we have the Inuvialuit settlement region. We have Nunavut, which I'm assuming most of you are the most familiar with, our newest territory, and where a lot of people assume all Inuit live, which is not true. We're trying to also bust that myth. So we also have, we also represent Nunavik, Northern Quebec, as well as Nunatsiavut, which is Northern Labrador. So those are the 4 regions that are represented at the ITK level. So this is Natan Obed. He is the president of ITK. So he leads the work that we do, but it is guided primarily by the people underneath, which are the presidents of the 4 land claim organizations that represent the modern land claim agreements that represent the areas in Inuit Nunanga. So for the Inuvialuit region, we have Dwayne Smith. For Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, we have Aluki Kutik, President Kutik, and for Makivik Corporation for Northern Quebec Nunavik, that's Pita Atami. For Nunatsiavut government, we have Johannes Lamp. For so that is the 4 presidents and voting members for the ITK Board of Directors. And underneath that, we have 3 members that are non-voting members. They are they're permanent participants, but not voting. So we have Lisa Kupukalik. She's new to the ITK Board of Directors. She's the president of ICC Canada, which is Inuit Circumpolar Council. So that represents Inuit in a whole circumpolar sense that doesn't have the boundaries of countries. It's the circumpolar Inuit that she represents. We have Jerry Sharp, President Sharp. She is from Paututi, the Inuit Women's Organization within Canada, the national organization. And then Brian Pottle, he is the president of the Nunavut Inuit Youth Council. So these are the decision makers when it comes to Inuit early learning and childcare, as well as how funds are distributed across Inuit regions. And this ITK board, as well as the excellent guidance and leadership from President Obed, has really strengthened the unity of Inuit across Canada, which has really allowed for some really meaningful work to be done and some really meaningful things to move forward in a unified way. So to explain a little bit about Inuit Tapiri Kanatami, we have kind of broken down the process. So we have the 4 land claim organizations, and then we have the 3 non-voting members. And then we, within this work of our organization, this is how decisions are made. So it's never just one person making a decision and speaking on behalf of all of Inuit. This is how the voice can be unified together, but in a very cohesive and collective way. So we have many different files that touch on many different socioeconomical issues that are facing Inuit today, where we are putting our time and efforts into advocating for Inuit. So you'll be able to see that we do have under policy advancement, which is where I work, an Inuit early childhood development working group. And this working group, I'll speak to a little bit more, but it's one of the many working groups that report and provide guidance to the National Inuit Committee on Health, as well as to the ITK Board of Directors. So there's many different voices that are being heard as you can tell, with many different, or with such a large landscape, we really need to make sure that we're engaging with Inuit across Canada. So this is kind of how we do it. So I did mention the Inuit Child Development Working Group. So this is a national committee that has existed for over 17 years. And they come together to talk about national policies related to early learning and childcare. And the majority of the members actually have been on the working group for many, many years, the majority of probably those 17 years. Some are original members. So we're very thankful that we have so many voices that have been through the this transitional period that we've had with early learning and childcare in the last even 3 years. So with this working group, we have representation that mirrors the ITK Board of Directors. The only place where it's a little bit different is the Makivik Corporation has allowed their seat to go to the Kativik regional government, so that they are more oversee the early education file. So that's why they have the seat on the working group. Within this working group, we also have a national Inuit partnership table. And at this table, we welcome our federal partners. So we have we have ESDC, so we have Economic Development and Social Development Canada, and we have Public Health Agency of Canada. Anyone who is wanting to connect and seek guidance, is moving anything forward when it comes to Inuit at the national level, they would come to this table to present, to speak, and to ask questions, and to seek guidance at this table. We've also opened this up to the new Canada-wide partners as well at the ELCC Secretariat. So this is the table where a lot of the discussions are happening around early learning and childcare. And then we bring these any decisions regarding funding or any large pieces of decision making go to the ITK Board of Directors, who will speak on behalf of Inuit. So in 2017, the working group that I was talking about created the Inuit submission for the creation of the National Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework. So for a lot of you, I'm hoping everyone here knows, but some of you may not know, there was a lot of work that went into the creation of the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework. And there was a huge piece that was specific to Inuit on this as well. So I wasn't involved, unfortunately. It sounds like it was an amazing time, but there was a lot of work to be done and a lot of voices to be heard from. So the main focus was to engage with communities and families and educators and experts in the field to really understand what an Inuit framework would look like within the National Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework. So after 4 months of research, 8 engagement sessions, and 200 rights holders and stakeholders participation, there was the creation of the Inuit submission to Employment and Social Development Canada regarding the National Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework. This is available if anyone wants to do some background research. So that work all led into the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework, but specifically to the Inuit Early Learning and Childcare Framework. And with this came a 10-year agreement, which we're still working within. I think we're at the 5-year mark. If I do my math right. But I just wanted to speak on the goals and principles, because this is where we still want to ensure that these goals and principles that were included in the original Inuit early learning and childcare framework are still continued on into the Canada-wide childcare framework and the Canada-wide system. So we want to ensure that moving forward, and this is the main goal that we are reminding our federal partners of, is that we want to ensure that the existing framework is not lost, it's not overshadowed, but only enhanced and built upon to ensure that these goals and principles really are concrete and a priority of the national wide system and not just within the Indigenous early learning and childcare framework. So like I mentioned a little bit before about Inuit, the Inuit early learning and childcare system is grounded in Inuit and Inuit culture. This is a huge piece of reconciliation. It's a huge piece of the priorities within ITK, the priorities within the regional Inuit organizations. So it's the foundation is right there. Another piece is Inuit have self-determination in the development, design, and delivery of programs and services for Inuit children. We are starting to see this more and more, that self-determination is being respected within the land claim organizations and within the regions, but always being reminded that we can do more and we can encourage this throughout all levels of our work. And so I won't read all of them because I think it's really important that we talk about, or I at least open myself up for questions and to give space to Charlene as well. But we just wanted to remind everyone of the goals and principles again, just to ensure that people are aware that there are existing Inuit early learning and childcare framework goals and principles that we want to see continued into and included in the early learning and childcare system across Canada. So that was, I hope that was within my time. I really appreciate being given this invitation. I feel very welcomed by this team, and I feel very fortunate to be a part of this panel. So if there's any questions or comments, or if we want to pass it over to Charlene, I'm happy to do that as well. Thank you so much, Margot.
Thank you, Amy. So interesting and always exciting to hear from you. Just by way of an update, Karen Isaac has joined us. Yay. We thought she was going to be unable to join, but she has joined us. I won't stop now to introduce her. I'll pass it on right away to Charlene, and then just before Karen is about to speak, I will give you her introduction. So over to you, Charlene.
Thank you, Margot. Tanse, everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you from my home office here in the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Stolo First Nations. And I, of course, want to recognize our 39 Métis chartered communities in which we serve in BC. So it really is a privilege and an honor to be here with all of you this evening. And Amy, it was lovely to hear you speak again every time I have the opportunity to engage and hear your workshop. It's always, I gain so much knowledge. So I really appreciate that. So this evening, I have several slides to share with you, and to be honest, it was hard to make it short because there's so much that I feel like I want to share with all of you. I'd like to start off by just sharing that today I am representing Métis Nation BC, and Métis Nation BC is just one of the Métis governments in Canada. The Métis Nation is represented at the national and international levels by the Métis Nation Council. So for those of you not from BC, I encourage you to connect with the Métis Nations in your province. So what's next for Indigenous ELCC? Next slide, please, Erica. So as Amy spoke about in her presentation, I just wanted to touch on the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework. as it represents the Government of Canada and Indigenous peoples' work to co-develop a transformative Indigenous framework that reflects the unique cultures, aspiration, and needs of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children across Canada. The framework sets out a shared vision, principles, and path forward for Indigenous early learning and childcare, a Canada where all Indigenous children have the opportunity to experience high quality, culturally rooted early learning and childcare programming. Alongside the distinctions-based approach, which Amy spoke about as well, and I will follow up in the next slides, this respects the specific priorities of First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis Nation. The framework does describe an overarching vision for a comprehensive and coordinated early learning and childcare system led by Indigenous people. It establishes shared principles and includes specific gender and geographic considerations that represent the views of all Indigenous children and families. The Indigenous early learning and childcare framework is and will continue to be a shared journey towards transformation in the spirit of partnership, respect, and reconciliation. Next slide. In addition to the Indigenous early learning and childcare framework, the Métis Nation also has their own framework. The Métis Nation has a vision for early learning and childcare in which Métis children and families throughout the homeland are provided with culturally relevant, self-empowering ELCC programming and services that focus on the development and maintenance of strong Métis families and communities across the lifespan, beginning at birth. Métis Nation Early Learning and Childcare will promote the healthy growth and development of children and families through experiences that are grounded in Métis culture and community ways, while Métis-specific wraparound services, programs, and policies will support their ongoing well-being. Next slide, please. I do also want to touch, as I'm speaking from BC, we also have our British Columbia Early Learning Framework, in which it does clearly speak to the diversity among Indigenous communities, recognizing the diversity and richness of Indigenous communities throughout BC, which contributes to the pedagogies that are local and meaningful. There are, again, 3 very distinct groups of Indigenous people in Canada and BC: First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Next slide. So this is a very brief glimpse of our programs and services, but I wanted to have the opportunity to share this with you because with MNBC, we recognize the early years as a sacred time for Métis people. This is a time when children are most open and ready to learn. Supporting children and their families during these years and cherishing every child as a gift is key to the survival of and self-determination for Indigenous people in Canada. We continue to hear and learn, and we hear about some of the ways in which we can better support our successes, as well as ways in which we can learn from them to build a better transformed system, not only for Métis children and families, but for all children and families. Therefore, we continue to enhance and grow capacity within the nation to better support and respond to the needs of Métis families, providing Métis culturally safe programs and services. The first program that I want to talk about is our Métis Family Connections program. It is focused on helping families with children birth to 8, and it builds on a network of support with opportunities for early learning and childhood development. This program has been very key to our successes and to our learnings. It is really considered the program that is the gateway, so to speak, to all things that we do within early learning and childcare. We have navigators across the province that are working with individual families, and it's with these connections that we are able to determine what the needs of each community are across BC. So from this program, one of the programs that we have developed is our well-being program. And this program is available to our Métis children birth to 8 who are in need of extra supports and services for their development. So these are financial supports to assist them with a range of products and services. What was clearly identified through our Métis Family Connections program is the need for supports for families so our children could be successful. The majority of our children are currently accessing mainstream programs across BC. We have very few childcare programs, but I will share more about that in a little bit because we've got some on the horizon and some that have just been created. But with this well-being program, what it allows is also supports for children, for example, for speech therapy. So again, that they can be successful in that program. We've provided wheelchairs for children that had been unable to attend childcare because they didn't have access to a wheelchair, and now we're attending a childcare program with the use of this wheelchair. So this program has been very, very successful. Our Métis Childcare Benefit Program is another program that was developed by Métis Nation BC for families with Métis children, birth to 12 now, to ensure that they had access to childcare programs. As we know, affordability is always a concern, always an issue for a lot of our families. And what this program does is it is providing additional funding to what is already available from BC so that families can access programs so that we can remove this burden. Again, this has been a program that is extremely successful. Another program that I want to touch on is our Imagination Library program. Our Imagination Library program has been providing monthly books to Métis children for over 15 years, providing opportunities for our children and families to share these books, to bring the love of reading and early learning into their home. To date, we have 600 children that are active in this program, and they have received 4,834 books. Our Métis Family Connections program, which I spoke about, which again is sort of the gateway to all these programs and services, that has considerable enrollment as well. We are now at just over 1,400 children that we are serving in that program. Next slide, please. So Métis childcare expansion in BC. So MNBC has developed a childcare plan that is supporting our Métis families. We are creating Métis specific childcare spaces across the province. We're building relationships with existing childcare providers, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and ensuring that Métis culture is incorporated. What I will speak to here specifically, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about expanding of childcare spaces, as I said before, building of these relationships with our mainstream service providers, with Aboriginal Head Starts, with First Nations programs has been extremely important because this is where our children are currently accessing services. And it's not that they will leave these programs to attend our other childcare programs. It's really about just ensuring that we provide the supports needed to individuals, early childhood educators that are caring for Métis children and helping them to bring that culture into their programming. This is just a snapshot of one of our programs that we supported with in Merritt. This is the Cognac Aboriginal Head Start in Merritt, which opened in May 2022. And it was a partnership, and it was a very exciting partnership with the local Nicola Valley Institute of Technology, with our chartered community. And what this picture slide here really does highlight is we brought in one of our Métis artists to help us create the outdoor play space. And as you can see, it's beautiful. We have the bottom picture is one of my favorites with the Red River cart. And in the red is our Métis artist that created this beautiful play space for the children. Next. So this is just a quick snapshot of what we're trying to do in creating childcare spaces across the province, working with we have 5 nonprofit Métis service providers that are supporting in doing the operations of these centers. We're working very closely with our chartered communities. In the background, you can't quite see it so well, but that is a picture of one of our newest facilities that opened on the island in Victoria, Island Métis Childcare Center. In Kamloops, we acquired land to create a housing and childcare project, in which that is being operated by LMO, one of our Métis service providers in Kamloops, for 112 children. And it's going to be delivering programs and services for children birth to 8. And it does say on here, the center will open in June 2024, but unfortunately that's been delayed. in fact, all of our projects are a little bit delayed. We were very ambitious and hoping that things would be moving faster than they are. In Fort St. John, we have a 61 space childcare and housing project that is being created in partnership with our chartered community. And that was set to open November 2024. Again, that's going to be somewhat delayed too, but this space is going to provide holistic childcare programming to support the needs of families and provide children with consistent quality childcare from birth to age 12. Another example of the programs that we are creating is a 61 space childcare housing and childcare project, again, which is in Campbell River, and it's in partnership with MNBC and North Island Métis Association. Set to open in January 2025, it too is going to be creating a facility that provides comprehensive childcare programming to support the needs of families and provide children with consistent quality childcare from birth to age 12. So again, these are some of our larger builds. We are building really based on what the needs of our communities are. So next slide, please. So the next two slides are based in Surrey, because Surrey has one of the largest urban Indigenous populations in BC, with over 13,000 Indigenous people calling Surrey their home. This diverse, young and growing urban Indigenous population is expected to grow exponentially over the next 15 years. This is an exciting project which we partnered with Kwantlen Polytechnic University for the creation of a childcare facility on the ground level with outdoor play space on the ground level as well. And the second story is dedicated to a new early childhood education program, because we have clearly identified that building and creating these spaces isn't enough. We need the educators. Next slide, please. And this project also in Surrey is MNBC partnering with Métis Family Services, our nonprofit Métis service provider in Surrey, which was selected by the City of Surrey as the operator for this new childcare facility, which we located inside the expansion of the Chuck Bailey Recreation Center, and it will be providing 57 spaces for childcare programming. Next slide, please. Métis representation in early learning and childcare. So the Métis early learning and childcare framework speaks to supporting early learning and childcare providers from inside or outside of the Métis Nation to be trained and educated in early child education and the cultural ways of the Métis Nation, thereby enhancing competency in working with Métis Nation children and their families. So in order to meet this need, what we have created, we have funding to support our Métis students to go back to school with wraparound services. We have partnerships with childcare centers through our Métis childcare benefit. So to support families and working directly with these childcare programs to pay them for these children to be accessing their programs, and the development of Métis specific resources, which I will speak to more next. Recruitment and retention. So providing culturally competent, well-educated, trained, and well-compensated early childhood educators in healthy, equitable, and supportive work environments is a key priority. Promoting whenever possible the employment of Métis Nation individuals as early childhood providers. So in moving forward with our recruitment and retention plan and practice, we have 2 dedicated ECE recruitment and retention staff that are working very closely with post-secondary institutions. We have partnered alongside our Ministry of Employment and Training within MNBC to really support individuals that are interested in exploring a career in early childhood education. We are really working to inspire Métis individuals to join the ECE field by indigenizing and decolonizing ECE and making it a more comfortable place to work, which includes paying our ECEs a fair living wage and improving hiring processes. So one of the ways that we have done this is also by providing a supplement to our Métis early childhood educators, a supplement that just gives them that much extra and for them to recognize that they are valued and how much we appreciate them. The other thing that we are doing in recruitment and retention is going out to childcare centers across the province and providing training opportunities really grounded in Métis culture and how they can introduce that to families and children in their programs. So this is a busy slide, but this really is one of my favorite slides, because what we quickly realized is that there wasn't the Métis specific resources for our children to learn about their culture. So although there is an increased focus on Indigenous early years in BC and Canada, including childcare, early learning and culture and language, there are currently very few, if any, Métis cultural resources for the early years. Métis families, communities, early childhood educators, early years agencies, service providers, and schools do not have access to distinctions-based Métis resources. Our Métis Early Years Cultural Resource Development Project aims to develop these resources and implement them in British Columbia. So this is just a sample of some of the items that we have created, and we are launching our cultural resource kits, I'm hoping by April 1st, 2024, and we will be sharing those broadly so we can ensure that all children have access to these beautiful resources. And one of the last slide, I believe this is our mobile bus initiative. So this again is also a really exciting project. We have recognized in working with our families through our Métis Family Connections program, the importance of being able to access and support families wherever they are, really are meeting them where they are at. And we cannot possibly build and create childcare centers and distribute resources fast enough. So we have purchased 3 vans that are going to be located in regions 1, 2, and 3, with the option of sort of moving into other areas of the province, weather permitting. These vans are going to be fully equipped and will bring culture and resources to each community by visiting parks, drop-in programs, events, and other community gatherings. The goals of this initiative is really to share culture through as many venues as possible, provide access to cultural early years programming and resources, provide access to elders, so bringing elders with us in our vans to come and visit families. Maybe it may be at a Strong Start program, wherever they may be, we want to be able to meet them and to collaborate with all other MNBC ministries and community partners in supporting Métis citizens and their families. Next slide. And that's it. Marcy, thank you so much for your time. If time permits, we do have a short video to share with you. Otherwise, I'll make sure that the link gets shared with you. But again, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, thanks, Charlene. What an amazing initiatives that you have going on across the province. It's really quite remarkable. I am really happy to introduce to you, and I'm going to do it very short because I really want Karen to have the time to speak with you this afternoon. And I know our time is going to be very tight. My apologies for that. So Karen Isaac is the Executive Director of the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society. She is Mi'kmaq from the Gaspé region of Quebec. Karen has been in the Executive Director position with the Society for the past 17 years and has been involved in Indigenous childcare and children's issues throughout that time. So Karen, I'm not going to go into more than that because I would like you to have the floor. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Margot. I've been very, I know we don't have very much time, and I think I'm going to try to keep my presentation as brief as possible. But first of all, of course, according to protocol, I should acknowledge that I am meeting you all from my home office on the unceded ancestral lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. So I'm so happy to see you all. And I guess I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us here today to speak about what next for Indigenous early learning and childcare. It's a very important question. I mean, one that we have been struggling with for those of us in the field, including you, Margot, for the last 20 years. And the answer is both simple and complex. The what next is the full recognition of Indigenous rights and the resumption of Indigenous jurisdiction, plain and simple. I think I'm always curious about how individuals in our sector, from policymakers to childcare providers, are understanding them and what they mean for the work these important big words of jurisdiction and control. I think for most of us, or most of the people in the sector, have focused on, quote, culturally safe or culturally respectful programs and services. And I think while this is important, the foundation of cultural safety is the recognition of rights and the resumption of jurisdiction over the care and education of our youngest citizens. I suspect most of us are here today because we recognize the importance of the opportunity before us to build this Canada-wide system of quality ELCC. After all, it's been heralded as the opportunity of a generation. However, and I think we've heard this in the comments already from my two colleagues, that I wonder if there is equal recognition of this opportunity, of this as an opportunity to genuinely test the constitutional and legislative commitments that the federal government and the provincial government in BC have made to rights and jurisdiction. Their commitments to do business in a way that builds towards reconciliation and reclamation instead of perpetuating colonial narratives and structures. To me, this is the greatest opportunity in a generation to reestablish or to establish a rights-based public quality system of early learning and childcare that advances reconciliation. I don't want to dwell too much on the mistakes of the past. I think there is a genuine effort that's being made by the federal government through the how can I forget? Through the ELCC transformative initiative to allow for this change to happen. But again, I just want to remind everyone on the call tonight that Justice Sinclair has made some very important contributions to this dialogue around reconciliation. And the fact that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People must be the framework for reconciliation. And I think that applies in all spheres of public policy, but especially in early learning and childcare, because we all know the impact colonialism has the effects of colonialism on our families and children. So I would like to call our attention to Article 19 of the UN Declaration that states, and I quote, "States shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous people concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them." And I think you can agree with me that free, prior, informed consent are very straightforward words, and that their meaning when it comes to a Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare is complex. As I said earlier, that the federal government, I think there is hope for optimism. I think there have been some mistakes made in the past. For example, our leadership here in BC wasn't involved in the negotiation of the Canada-wide ELCC agreement. BC and Canada have acknowledged that this was a mistake. And so I think there's optimism and hope on the horizon in terms of how we do this work together, in terms of nation to nation. So I think there is some opportunity and hope on the way. And I guess recently, I think most of you are aware that the federal government released an information paper about the proposed federal ELCC legislation. And in this paper, it sets a tone by acknowledging the rights and roles of the UN Declaration in supporting the establishment of the Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare. And it also mentions and honors Section 35 of the Constitution Act and holds the goal of self-determination as an inherent right. I understand from the conversation this evening that Minister Gold will be introducing that legislation tomorrow. And so it'll be interesting to see, how that whether or not these principles and concepts are embedded in that particular piece of legislation. So, and I think that, Amy, I think you referred to this earlier in your presentation about the importance of ensuring that all of us understand that the Indigenous early learning and the ELCC framework need to be linked together, because all of us have a responsibility, whether or not to promote and support reconciliation. I think, yes, there absolutely needs to be there is absolutely a need for a distinct system, but both must uphold the rights of Indigenous people and advance reconciliation and the pursuit of reconciliation. I don't know how much time there is, Margot, but I guess I just wanted to leave with some, because we're always asked, you know, by our colleagues in the field, like, what can I do and what should I be doing about this? And so in closing today, I just wanted to offer some key suggestions about how everyone on this call can support what's next for Indigenous early learning and childcare. I'm so aware of the time that we don't have. So I guess my advice would be for people to expand and grow their own awareness and understanding of the words that, like Indigenous rights, title, and jurisdiction. There's a lot of literature, and I'm going to plug you, Margot, and the National Center for Aboriginal Health. There's a lot of resources there that speak to not only the experience, but the importance of self-determination to the mental and social well-being of our people. Also, I'd like you to reflect on what you learn and what it should mean for the work you lead in early learning and childcare. I think it's been alluded to that there are various frameworks and code of ethics that deal with recognition of Indigenous people, and of course, the whole project of reconciliation. And again, the third thing I'd like you to consider is to be clear or reflect on your own values. Ask yourself what if your values are aligned with the recognition of rights and the advancement of reconciliation. Chances are they do align, and I think most, if not everybody on this call, shares in the values of social justice and ensuring that the rights of children, all children, are recognized in this country. And I guess my parting words is, it's not going to be an easy process. It's a very difficult process. It's not an easy one, and we're not going to get there right away. But I think if we uphold the principles and values of reconciliation and truth and justice, I think we have a wonderful project ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that, those wise words for all of us to think about how we are in the world, how we are and how we think about children. So hi to you, Karen. So what an exciting panel this evening. We've heard so much from our speakers. I'm not going to say any words. I would like to get right to the chat and to invite Susan to present to us a question for the panel. I think we have about 6 minutes, and my apologies, I should have been a stricter chair, maybe, I don't know. But Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Margot. We have general questions to some of the participants. We have overarching questions about big programs. We also have more questions we can take if people want to put them in the chat. And I should say, whatever questions we can't get to tonight in the remaining 6 or 7 minutes, we'll be able to try to follow up and try to respond to in other ways. So please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I'm going to suggest we start with a question from Martha, friendly to all panelists, actually. Would you like to speak about the intersections between the federal, provincial, and territorial agreements, which do sometimes include some commitments to Indigenous ELCC and the distinction-based governance structures. How's it working? Is there consultations at the political development rollout question? Is there a quick answer to how it's going?
Who would like to, I'll leave that open. Karen, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, I will. And, you know, I can only speak to our experience in British Columbia. And, you know, as I tried to diplomatically say, it hasn't been easy. I mean, there is no clear process. There's lots of words, lots of actions. What I can tell you about the BC experience, though, is that we have the BC specific UN, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act. And even though that act was in place, you know, during the negotiation of the agreements, that particular piece of that particular document was ignored and our people weren't involved. I think we're trying to set up a process here in British Columbia that will bring the parties together, and that we will have a tripartite process. It's not going to happen quickly. It's going to take a lot of conversation, and we have a new government now in British Columbia. So I don't know what's going on across the country. I think, though, Amy, there's probably some developments there in your territory, the Northern Territory. But again, if any of you are interested, you should look at the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act and the commitments that BC is making to the act. So there are really key important principles there. And I think other jurisdictions it would be some good reading for them, I would submit.
Great.
But again,
Amy?
words are one thing and action and processes are another, and those are much more complicated. As you know, we've been spending, all of us here on the call, 30 years on this, getting a system going. It's taken that long. So I just throw that out there as it's not easy, and you know, the words need to be followed up with actions.
How true. Charlene or Amy, would you like to add anything to what Karen said?
I will let Amy speak because, again, it's from BC, but I agree with Karen that, you know, there's movement, there's discussions. Sometimes are those discussions too late? Maybe so, but I think it's an opportunity for us, for there to be that continued learning. There's significant growth that needs to continue. I agree. You know, when you look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and their call to action, you know, call to action 12 is really to develop culturally appropriate early childhood education programs for Aboriginal families, just really making sure, and we all have that responsibility, I really do believe, to ensure that government is following through on all these actions. It is documented, so we need to ensure that that follow through happens.
Thank you. Amy, any words at this point?
I won't really speak to the relationships between the provinces and territories and the Inuit organizations and regions, because that's a little bit, I won't speak on their behalf. That's not where I fit in this whole structure. I think, like my colleagues have said, it's very similar. I don't think that it's been consistent across. There's many different provinces and territories that intersect Inuit Nunga. The one thing that I will speak on is that in April of this year, the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, which is co-chaired by the Prime Minister and President Obed. So that is the meeting place between Inuit leadership, Inuit governance, and the federal government. They did pass the Inuit Nunga policy, which I will link it in the chat as well to give everyone some homework. But it does recognize the Inuit homelands as a distinct region that should be acknowledged by the federal government in all of the departments and all of the public sector. So we do have that moving forward. Again, it's a policy. It's not. It is to be, you know, it is to be honored, and we have had some really good feedback from our federal partners, and it gives a clear clear guidance on how to engage with Inuit across Canada. So we are really hoping that that piece will help to strengthen those relationships. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. So Susan, I'm really conscious of time now. I'd like to pass it back to you. But first, thank you so much to the speakers. Really informative and so rich in your diversity. So thank you. Hi. Back to you, Susan.
Well, thanks, Margot. There's questions that we can't get to give you a sense of some of the rich stuff that's come up in the chat. We've got questions about models for expansion in northern, rural, and remote communities, how we'll actually do that. Questions about recruiting and retaining Indigenous educators and trying to encourage more folks to get into the field. Other question about urban-rural relations and how to serve distinctions-based people in large urban centers. And maybe an especially poignant question coming to us from Winnipeg, where looks like a serial murderer has been targeting Indigenous women, thinking about the importance about creating loving, caring spaces for a good future going forward. So there's much more to say. I see more links are being put into the chat. There's resources that folks can find to, including that wonderful video that Charlene has referenced. We'll be following up with you with a link. You'll be able to watch this again on YouTube, where this will live on in posterity. And now that we know who you are and that you're interested in these questions, we may find ways to reach out to you again. It's been an honor to listen to you all, and we're very grateful for the time our presenters, our chair, and our audience has made as we think about what's next for Indigenous early learning and childcare. I think that brings us then formally to a close. I'll say good night to everyone, or good afternoon where you are in the country, and we'll be watching closely to see what comes down at the next stages, particularly tomorrow. So thanks, everybody.